Alrighty, so week 6, we're getting into it now. We got the midterm coming up. There'll be a separate lecture after this that you'll definitely want to watch. We'll kind of scope things down for the midterm to make sure that you do well on that, and whatever. It covers all the important stuff. The test does, I believe. So that's doing the review. If you understand everything in the review, then you'll do well in the test, which is good. But also you'll take away the most pertinent stuff. It's kind of easy to get off on a tangent doing this lecture because there's a lot of info, a lot of different stuff, and I would say it's some opinion in there, but the basics are the basics. Oh boy, I'm looking out the window at termination dust, so we're at that time of year now. Good luck with that one. Personal loans. Okay. Lots of options here. I don't do personal loans too much. Personal loans are typically, when they're talking about personal loans, they're talking about unsecured loans. And since they're unsecured, they're typically at a higher rate. And typically the reason you're taking them out is because you didn't have something in reserve. The one thing that the book won't really touch on, which I will right now, is your own 401k or IRA. That is pretty amazing. I've never had any problems taking loans against my own 401k, and literally I've done it on my phone in minutes, and the money shows up in the account, and then the money is deducted from your account. So the way this works is, if you have, say, a 401k, and let's say you've got 50 grand in it, typically, depends on your employer, depends on the company you're holding 401k with, but you can take a loan against up to 50% of the balance, and then you pay it back, but you pay it to yourself. So the one downside, and they act like it's a huge downside, and it can't be if the market's ripping. If you pull that money out, let's say you pull 25 grand out, and the rest of your account is going up at a fairly substantial rate, you're not going to participate in that. The money, until you pay it back into your account, is not, it's not going to gain. Additionally, you're paying an interest rate, but the interest rate ends up in your account. You're essentially paying interest to yourself, which is nice. So it doesn't work for all occasions, but I've done it for a ton of things. Business loans, if I'm buying a bunch of equipment and I need 25 grand or something. Granted, it's going to, my salary is going to be knocked down. Not obviously my salary is going to stay what it is, but my take home is going to be knocked down by a certain percentage. And I think these were 3 to 5 year was kind of the payback term. And if you quit your job, you got to pay it all back at one lump sum. So they kind of got you in that regard, but 401ks and things like that are sort of they're good, pretty good idea. They do give you some disciplined savings, but the real bonus of a 401k and an IRA, and this will come up in later chapters, is the match policy. If you've got a employer that's matching, and say you put up 3% and they put up 3%, well, that's extra money. If you don't come up with that, let's say you're making 100 grand, it's you're doing all right, and that's $3,000 you have to come up with, but they'll match it with $3,000. You're essentially working for an extra $3,000 a year. Your competitor, or not competitor, but your coworker who doesn't do it, who's kind of a schlub, yeah, they work for less than you do, so you can kind of take some solace in that. There's all sorts of things. You got to study your employer's benefits and all that kind of stuff. I hate to say it, you got to study their health care too. I mean, I don't hate to say it, but sometimes some of the best health care plans out there are not in the private sector, and that's kind of sad because I don't know, it just incentivizes people to maybe take jobs that aren't completely aligned with what they want to do, or don't have the highest potential, but the benefits are so good. And I'm a realist. It's you got to do what you got to do, but it's a big picture. When you go to work for an employer, we'll look at that. But anyway, tonight we're talking about personal loans. So sources, other sources, commercial banks, savings institutions, credit finance companies. Finance companies, again, you're struggling here. You should have either had the money yourself, maybe on the side, or maybe taken a 401k type loan, or then you end up with a finance company. Now, when they say personal loans, in my mind, they're not talking about mortgages at all. So these are generally loans you're taking on depreciating assets, and that's why I'm being so negative. I don't mind borrowing money for investing in appreciating assets, but to use borrowed money for depreciating assets, you're an indentured servant. You're working for they love you. You're going to get all sorts of whatever, but you're making money for other people. You're not going to end up where you want to be. So there are plenty of depreciating assets you need to own, a vehicle and things like that, but try and minimize the exposure to that. And I know I don't mean to be the bearer of mad news, but and glum, but it will definitely pay off in the end. And you'll be able to get out of mediocrity and not become just a slave's a pretty strong word, but a working indentured servant. Anyway, family, friends, and members, you can do that. You can do that a few times if you pay it back, but if you don't. Anyway, there's other options, but if your parents or family members, somebody's out there, that's great. I loaned a buddy some money a while ago, and he's got tons of money, but he just didn't want to do the whatever. He paid me 10%, so I wasn't quite loan sharking him, but he set the terms. I said okay. So peer-to-peer lending. This was kind of a buzzword. Perhaps better rates. It's not necessarily. You're going to go with the cheapest rate. What happens in peer-to-peer? And this is more. Also, you may want to invest in this. I never have, but what they do is they get these groups, and it's more like on a retail level, where you have some money and you're either a lender or the lendee. I don't know, the person borrowing, the person providing the money. The person providing the money, they get a reasonable return, and the way they mitigate the risk, because normally small loans are pretty risky, is that this is something that's come about obviously with the internet. So they'll pool this large group of borrowers, and you'll loan these little micro loans. So you say you invest $5,000 with this company, and they'll split your $5,000 into 50 different loans at $100 a piece. So you'll have a little chunk of all these different loans. All these different people have taken loans, and the notion is that because you're diversified, that somebody's going to flake out. But because you got 50 of them, you'll still do all right. Your return will still be in there, since your risk has been spread out amongst all these different borrowers. So it's getting bigger, and again, I don't know, I'm not super pessimistic, but I get tons and tons of junk mail from all these different Prosper, and I think there's Cabbage and all these other people who have these schemes, and it's. I mean, there is no free lunch. The loan still has to pay a return, and the fact that they're sending me a ton of marketing stuff, that's expense too. For example, like if you're looking for auto insurance, the guy's flying the little airplane around. Who's buying that fuel? Don't tell me you have the cheapest rates when you're constantly, spending all this money trying to do the hardcore marketing. I've never found some of those companies that do the highest level of marketing the best rate. Although I know marketing, I've taught marketing before, and it can be effective, but sometimes they're just spending a lot of money. Typical amounts 1 to 3,000, so fairly well typical for retail loans. That's kind of the amount that people are typically looking for. Credit report, FICO score. So that FICO score is your credit score, and yeah, the credit report. So loan is sensible, periodic payments. What you have to do anytime you're taking out a loan is, let's look at a vehicle again. You take out this loan and it's, I don't know, $800 or something a month, and you're like, oh, that's not bad. Well, if it's say a 5-6 year vehicle loan, it's not bad for the first couple of years because you're enjoying that car. It's a new car and everything else. 6 years down the road, you're trying to make those final payments, and now the car's starting to have mechanical problems. The resale value is not much, and now you're still paying $800. I mean, again, they want you. I was just driving by a friend of mine's house. He's always got a new truck. Never, every 3 years, he just does it, and he's just, he's a traditional guy, and he just does that, and he's. Anyway, that works for him. For me, not so much. I was gone this week and I had another rental car. And, oh my God! Something on rental cars. Well, I'll talk about that later. We need to concentrate on this. Okay, personal process. So balance sheet, personal cash flow. So again, some of those documents, they're going to have their own forms. But if you know where you stand and you have your own documents kind of pre-populated, if you had taken that time to look at where your assets are, you're going to be able to fill that out. Amount of the loan and the interest rate. Again, when you're getting into loans, you're getting into salesman type people, and so especially like you go on a car lot, they're going to say, "Oh, what do you want your monthly payment to be?" And sure enough, they'll get that monthly payment, but you're out to whatever number of years. When I was in Spain, they were taking mortgages out to 60 years. You're not even going to be here. I mean, your children are taking that loan. So they can get your monthly rate down, but the interest you're paying over that time is probably pretty excessive. Amortization, amortize, whatever. Regular payments coming out. Series of equal payments. And that is the beauty of well, this gets more into home mortgage loans, but the amount, if they're equal, as inflation, say you get a 30-year mortgage, 30 years from now, your payment is not much given inflation and this debasement and the rest of it. Each payment includes principal and interest. I'll show you that. Maturity, duration, life of the loan. So, collateral. Collateral is what I was talking about when I was talking about kind of poo-pooing personal loans. If you don't have collateral, the interest rate's going to be higher because the lender they don't have any security, right? If it's a secured loan, the lender's happy. The interest rate is going to be lower. His happiness is going to be reflected in not being as nervous. If it's unsecured, the interest rate's going to be quite high. So credit cards, for example, that's why they have such high interest rate, because they can't come and repossess the junk you bought at Target or whatever. That's just not practical. If it's on a car loan, they can make it for quite a bit less because they have the legal process and the repo guys and the whole network to come take that thing back if you flake out. So, co-signing, don't do this. Co-signing means what happens is my credit's not so good. I go to the bank or whatever, I can't get a loan. I want to buy this car, I need it really bad, and they won't approve it. So you are the friend, and I come to you and I said, hey, co-sign on this loan for me because my credit's crap, and I blew off a bunch of loans previously, so they won't give me a loan. Can you sign this for me? I'll promise to pay it back. Well, once you sign on that co-signer, you're obligated for that loan. So now, when history kind of repeats, I flake out again. I don't pay the loan. Now, I don't even respond to the collection agencies or anybody. Well, the collection agencies, they're not going to spend much time with me as the primary person because I've I'm a proven deadbeat. I mean, I have a crappy credit rating. I don't pay my loans back. I'm going to go right after the cosigner, the collection agency. So dog the bounty hunter types, they say you owe 20 grand to somebody. The bank will just say, we don't want to deal with this. We're going to sell it off to the to the collection agency for 10 grand. They're entitled to collect that full 20 grand worth of debt, but they got to go through the hassle of getting it. They got to go through the hassle of chasing you down, which they will do. That's how they make their money. So now you probably get blindsided by collection agencies saying, hey, this loan is due, your name, you co-signed on it, so you're 100% obligated, you're going to pay. And now your credit rating's trashed, or you come up with the money and your ex-friend, whatever, they're probably feeling bad, but not bad enough to come up with the 20 grand. So anyway, if you co-sign, you jumped into a mess. This is actually where, say, hey, I mean, I'm not saying it's a good idea to loan your friend 10 grand or something, but that's probably preferable to being a cosigner. At least you're dealing with your friend. The dog, the bounty hunter, has no claim against you if you just made a loan to your friend, and they flake out on the other part of they borrow 20 grand, they got 10 from you and 10 from the bank. Nobody's got a claim against you. You have a claim against your friend, but not a good situation, but better than being a cosigner. All right, loan application, we can fill out forms. APR. APR is what things are quoted as. So any other rate does not matter. It needs to say APR, annual percentage rate. That means a certain thing legally. So if they say, oh, we'll get you for this interest rate for this length of time, and then they'll switch to this, and it's some complex thing. There'll be like a teaser rate for the first. No, you need APR. APR is going to have a calculated annual percentage rate. I don't care what the first couple months are. I don't care what it is over the. No, I need to know what the legal. That's the only way you can compare interest rates. So here's some sample loans, interest expenses, other finance expenses. So there'll be fees or something like that. So there's a lot more to a loan other than just an interest rate. Here they have a lower, let me see, other finance expenses. So this is zero and total expenses. So this guy, even though the interest expense is lower, they have this fee thrown in, or this guy's got a huge fee thrown in. And so it ends up being the cheapest one is the one with apparently a little higher interest rate, but no bonus fees. So anyway, APR would catch that. APR would catch these bogus little charges. And sometimes they're not bogus charges. It's just marketing. Oh, we can give you a loan for a lower rate, and your interest expense will only be 160%. For examples, it would be better if they had this as a percentage. But anyway, this one probably had some teaser interest rate, which was not APR. APR would take into account all these other charges. Interest rate on personal loans. So, yep. This isn't so dramatic in a shorter term loan. On a mortgage, it's very dramatic on how the ratio of interest versus principal. Principal means, say you take out a loan. Well, what are they even saying? Yeah, loan balance of $2,000. So your principal starts out at $2,000. That's actually the money that needs to be paid back, and the interest is in addition to that. So here, on the first month, $20 worth of interest, and only $157 worth of principal. So higher chunk of interest, lower chunk of principal, and by the end of the loan, small amount of interest, much larger. But anyway, the numbers just aren't dramatic on a yearly loan. On a mortgage, they're huge. So we'll talk about that. And the reason why it's huge on a mortgage as well is because interest is tax deductible. Personal loans, not tax deductible. Now, Trump is going to change things up, perhaps. I don't know what the status of it is, but supposedly for American vehicles, U.S. made vehicles, there's going to be tax deductible interest on those, but should happen. All right, so the car thing. This is the crushing thing for most people financially. They could be so far ahead if they could just rein that in. Consider how your decision of adding credit card debt to your loan debt, no debt solution, limited by short-term loan. Anyway, again, look at your needs versus your wants. Try and stay within your needs, at least initially. You can have nice things, but if you can just delay a little bit, or maybe just be smarter in buying them. Buy something a year old that's still got maybe a warranty. Well, it should have a warranty, just a year old. But that drive it off the lot depreciation has already taken place. Preferences, condition, insurance, resale. Things like Edmunds and things like that. Alaska's a Wild West. We're too small a market. These guys don't really wade into it. Also, we're a non-disclosure state. If you're in some place like California or even most states where they charge sales tax on used car transactions, they are very much aggressively tracking how much vehicles are traded for. Since Alaska is a non-disclosure state and there's no sales tax on those, the state really doesn't care, doesn't record it, which is nice. But it means that things in Alaska tend to sell for way too much or way too little. Repair expenses, finance rate, and loan contracts. So there are some things, you want to make sure. I remember when I was growing up, my father would actually, I had to buy my own vehicles, but he would actually pay the insurance as long as I didn't get a sports car, because he wasn't thinking I was going to be super reckless. But it was just that sports cars had quite a bit more insurance. So I always wanted a CUDA. In fact, I drove some great CUDAs, 346 pack convertible CUDAs and stuff like that. Could never get one. I went with a Challenger. The Challenger was, back in the day, I was pretty cool back in the 70s, let me tell you. Anyway, it had wasn't a convertible and was considered like a family car. Anyway, same body and everything, but repair expenses, again, I've kind of voiced my opinion on EVs. You guys are going into a crazy time with EVs, because those repair expenses, they're you have something flip up and hit the battery pack or do something like that, you can be looking at astronomical expenses. Maybe things will get worked out, but those things scare me to death in terms of repairs. And insurance, yes. Well, we talked about insurance. I've driven cars. I've gone self-insured. I mean, you have to have liability, but the collision is what gets you. But I had a Dodge Viper in Germany, and the insurance on it was $18,000 a year, which I didn't. That was for collision. But I could have basically bought a new Viper every couple of years. I just was careful, and it worked out. In fact, I even got a free trip to the Ferrari factory in Maranello with the Ferrari dealer from Saarbrücken, and I went down there together, because he was the only, or I was the only guy he'd ever met who had a Viper who had crashed it. Vipers were crazy. They had no traction control, no anti-lock brakes, way too much power. It was just a hoot. Anyway, okay, Kelley Blue Book. So yeah, again, Kelley Blue Book, Edmunds. Another insidious thing that's happened is car dealers did not like these guys, because they would come out with values that were typically so much less than what the used car people claim these cars were worth. So beat them, join them. They bought these folks. So if you look at who actually owns Kelley Blue Book and Edmunds, they're into big car now. Basically, there's only a few big companies, Lithias and the other people of the world who sell the majority of the cars, and one of those companies controls these folks now, and so they fixed that little problem by buying that company. Non-disclosure state, talked about that. Pardon me. And yeah, Alaska, you got to know what you're doing in terms of used cars, and a lot of times it makes sense to go out of state. Now, getting a car shipped up here, again, I got my daughter's little Jeep shipped up here for $1,500 from Montana. No problems. Inside a truck, fully stocked with stuff. You know, she didn't have to unload it or anything. But if you go to some of these car carriers, $4,000, something like that. Anyway, there are ways to do it, but it's a the quotes on that range at least 100% in terms of bids you'll get. But it is one way to maybe make things easier. So she's looking to get a car. She's kind of rating the cars here. Expected value, repair expenses, insurance. So trying to, once you have this data, but trying to get this data is pretty hard. There's certain makes. I mean, I kind of have Toyotas. I hate to say it, but I mean, well, I do like Toyotas. But a guy came on my property one time, and he was building a log cabin thing for me. And anyway, he was driving an old Land Cruiser. I said, "Oh man, you like your Land Cruiser?" He goes, "Yeah, because I hate working on cars." And I mean, that was it. That's all he needed to say. That the fact that he didn't like working on cars, so he bought a Toyota, so he didn't have to. Anyway, everybody's got their preference. I'm not trying to poo-poo. I can't affect Toyota stock or anything like that, but there's certain brands that may cost a little bit more in the used car market, but they probably sell for a little more in the used car market. And there's other ones that are just sort of like a Bic lighter or whatever that just are throwaway items. So negotiating the price, this is why I don't do this. You all are wise enough to get online, figure out what the prices are. Don't go to the lot and, we're just looking today, and next thing you know, you walk out with a car. Or the whole thing about, what payment do you want? We'll just stretch the term out as far as possible. And no haggle dealers. Yeah, we don't negotiate on price. Our prices are set, so you don't have to haggle. Well, I wasn't going to haggle and try and get the price higher. I mean, who's this favorite? So, anyway, financial decisions. Yeah, be careful. I mean, how long are you going to keep the car? How long? If you're somebody who's going to put a ton of miles on this, and in 7 years, if that car is not even going to be running anymore, that's probably not a good deal. Or you need to go with a more shorter term. But have your ducks in line. Do not get pressured into bad decisions. So go figure. The amount will go down if you stretch out the term. So you say, I want to spend only $300. Oh, okay, not a problem. So you're buying this, 10-year-old car, and you're financing it for 5 years. I don't know if they go that long on an older car, but anyway, you can get yourself into a weird situation. The other thing they play the game with is the trade-in price. You'll want to feel like you really took something down, and they'll come off the MSRP, the sticker price of the car by a bunch, and they won't give you jack for your trade-in. Or conversely, they'll give you a tremendous amount. What you think you always think your car's worth more than what they're going to give you for trade-in. It is kind of, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens on Facebook Marketplace and other places, but typically if you can sell your car on your own, you will do better than taking it to the lot. Leasing's a popular alternative for people that can't do math. This is typically doesn't work out in your favor. I mean, it's what keeps BMW and Mercedes and those people alive. And to tell you the truth, I probably would do it for those vehicles because they don't quite last like they used to. And so the repair expenses on some of those European vehicles now are on the newer ones. Advantages of leasing: lower down payment, return the car. Just return the car. I wish it was that simple. You're essentially on a long-term rental. If it's got too many miles, if it's got damage, you still have to typically come up with some money at the end anyway, but you may have to come up with quite a bit more if the car's not in good shape. So, no equity. Yeah, you're not selling it at the end. You're turning it in plus giving a little bit of money. You have to pay for those charges and drive too many miles, or if you turn it in early. Sure. Student loans. These are a necessary evil. Just don't go nuts. You're investing in yourself. This gets back to broader decisions. Or do you have a degree that's going to be marketable? You all are going to be in the world of AI, so there's going to be a lot of the job market's going to get more and more competitive as people are whatever. I'm not that AI. Some of it's just slop right now, but as it gets better, it will start displacing some workers. Interest may be tax deductible. Forgiveness. So this is another thing when you're looking at a company. I was in the military. I didn't have that much in the way of loans, and what I did have after a certain time, it was forgiven. So that was, if you're serious, if you're taking out a ton of loans, you may want to. I still believe that there's certain areas. Let's say you're a teacher, you want to go teach in some urban area, or perhaps more appropriate for Alaska. I believe there are some villages, if you're teaching out there, that they may forgive this if you sign up for a couple 3 years to do that. It's if you look at your actual salary, if they're paying off your loans, that might be pretty enticing because your salary, your take home might not be that high, but the fact that they're knocking your loans out for you could definitely make a decision for you. Home equity loan. Okay, so again, they're not talking about 401k loans and other loans that I would go to before I do this, but a home equity loan is one of the least bad options. What you're doing here is, if you say you own a home and you paid $300,000 for it, it's worth $500,000. You've got $200,000 worth of equity. You can borrow against that equity, and 80% of the equity in the home. So if you had that $200,000, you can get 80% of that. So what is that? About 160. And but read the fine print. You're supposed to be using that typically for home repairs. If you deduct, and those things are typically because it's under a mortgage, typically are deductible. But if the IRS happens to audit you and you have a nice brand new boat out front, but you have no receipts for any home improvements, you might have a problem. Impacted the economy, things we can't control. Yep. In a down market, you may not have equity, not have any equity. Use a lot of variable rates. Up to $100,000 is tax deductible. That's probably been increased because this slide's getting old. Payday loan. Okay, things are off the rails. You're one step away from kind of being in the gutter here, or you're going to be in the gutter because you took out this loan with a huge interest rate. Yeah, alternatives. When they put credit cards as an alternative, that shows you how bad payday loans are. Credit cards are 25% roundabout. So yeah, payday loans are worse. Don't do this. Restructure your life. You are on a downward spiral. Alrighty. So again, those are the kind of loans that some of them are necessary student loans. I'm not going to fault you for doing that. You know, you're investing in yourself. Vehicles, just temper things. You know, stick with your needs, not with your wants. Now, purchasing a home. Now, this is now you're investing. You're investing. You are. Let's say that's tough to do right now because the interest rates are high. But if you're borrowing money and you're putting in an asset that is appreciating at a greater rate than the interest rate that you're paying for, you're making money. Now, in the case of a home, you're also living in it, so that's a bonus too. So even if you're only slightly losing money, even if the say mortgage rates right now are about 6%, and maybe housing's going up at 3 or 4%. Yeah, that's 2% to the bad, but you've got a place to live. So it's again not, and it's you're going to refinance when rates go lower as they're starting to creep down. 10 to 20% down payment, fixed rate, 30 years. That is the typical, and there's lots of reasons for that, but that's the most common. You have different options. I've taken 10-year loans in certain situations, and I've taken I took a 10-year variable rate, but that was like a different time in the market. Yeah, they have all these formulas that boomers thought were great, may not apply to your situation. Sure, try and live in San Francisco or Miami or something like that, and not be way over that. So anyway, the rules of thumb: you got to get a loan, and anyway, but this is what I was telling you to kind of scrimp on the vehicle. I'm a little bit. I think it's prudent to be a little further into real estate. Now, one thing is big homes. Not that we're in the market for $1 million homes, but those things are tough on the market. They're tough to move, and you would think real estate agents who sell those kind of homes make a lot of money. No, because they just don't sell that quickly. The little $300,000 homes, those sell a lot, and those are quite liquid. So, let's say you were in the market to buy a $300,000 or $500,000 home, you might even want to, especially for your first home, you're going to get a better rate since you are the owner occupier, right? You move into that house for 3 to 5 years, and then you build up a little bit of equity, and then you move into your next house, and you don't sell that house. You turn that house into a rental, and you kind of keep doing that. You keep leapfrogging up the real estate scale, and you would, and this is just a strategy you might employ, you would end up with a fairly good little network or string of assets of rental properties, all with good interest rates. Because if let's say 5 years from now you say, okay, I'm going to make this moderately priced home a rental property, you don't have to change the interest rate. You don't have to get a new loan just because you're moving out of it. Now, let's say you buy a home, you've got this dream home you really like, and you say, I want to get some rental property, some investment property, and you try to get a loan for a business property, or anyway, the interest rate is going to be considerably higher because you're not owner occupied. All those little Scoobies they give you as the owner occupier go away. So you're going to be paying a couple points higher in interest, couple percentage points higher in interest, which means that the profitability of your rental home may not even be there now. So it does pay to, you can buy a apartment complex or some condos at some point in your life, but the smarter thing to do is maybe live in them for a little bit, at least to get the financing down, and then move on. I had a brother-in-law. It's been like a long time since he did this, but yeah, he bought a home, and the mortgage company actually came out and they said, "Wait a minute, you're not even living in this. You're still married." He's like, "Yeah, we were breaking up, but we got better. We worked things out, So he got the loan, and anyway, that was kind of, he could have gotten in trouble for that one, but he didn't. So affordable down payment. Yep, got to come up with that. Mortgage payments. Other expenses to consider. Yeah, when you move into a home, you're going to kind of make it your own. And plus, you're going to have to pay for other things, snow removal perhaps, repairs, painting, roof, all that other kind of stuff. So there can be some extra expenses. But let's say you're looking at a situation and the payments are a couple $1,000 a month to cover the mortgage, or you stay in a place and you rent for $1,800 or even a couple thousand. That rent is going to increase as inflation goes along. So 10 years from now, that rent's probably going to be $2,600, and your mortgage payment is still going to be $2,000. 30 years from now, that rent's probably going to be $8,000 or something, and that mortgage payment's still going to be $2,000. So that's where things kind of catch up, is the fact that rent is tied to inflation. Yeah, these guys they're a little shell shocked. They typically do go up or stabilize. Having exposure to real estate and crypto, everything seems so flat compared to crypto. So my numbers kind of jaded. All right, selecting the home. Well, again, what you want to do is look at what the average buyer or seller is interested in. I mean, you can let your own personal preferences, have some input, but you don't want something that's too unique or too hard to sell. You want something, especially if it's a home that you're going to flip or rent, you want to make sure that it's desirable to everybody. So people without kids should still consider what the schools are like. They should consider, everything else, the kind of the neighborhood, the overall sense of it, because you're not just buying this for yourself, but you're ultimately probably going to be selling it at some point, and so that's where you want to be. And so you want something that doesn't stand out too bad. In terms of neighborhood, you never want the worst or the best house in the neighborhood. You want to be kind of in the middle. Cost of buying versus renting, there's a lot of moving parts, but yeah, buying's going to work out in the long run. But the other thing is, too, if you're not going to be in the area that long, if you're going to be moving quite quickly, maybe it makes more sense to rent. Consider a condominium. I'm not a big fan. Condominiums, for me, the problem with that is I have a real estate license. It's paused, or I don't know. I've never sold real estate again, but I did sell real estate for a short period. And I was fine, but I was working full-time at the university, and I had another job with a big defense corporation. I just didn't have time for 3 jobs. So, but I did have a condominium that, not mine, but a client wanted to sell. And the condominium association, which is kind of typical up here, is they only allow so many rentals in their condominium complex. And so ultimately, let's say you've got a house and you're trying to sell it. The market's soft. You're not getting any offers. You say, screw it, I'm going to make it a rental. Call it good. Well, if it's a condominium, you may not have that choice. They may say, nope, we've got enough renters. You're going to have to sell. And so you're going to lower your price, or worse, your neighbor's going to lower their price, and now you're in a race to the bottom. That wouldn't have happened if you would have had a house. Plus the quality of life, I'm just not a fan. Condominiums, you own everything from the paint inward on the house. So you don't own, the stairs and the parking lot or the exterior walls. None of that is yours. The roof, that's all on the condominium association. You just own the interior. Relying on a real estate agent, again, I have no love lost for some agents, but as a buyer, it's a no-brainer. I had an agent who helped me out considerably because I was looking at properties. Zillow was brand new back then, and I was putting myself right in a super shady area up on Highland Drive in Eagle River, avalanche zone. But man, it was cheap compared to everything else. And she knew all these things and said, nah. So I got this cool sunny spot. Now I'll be selling that property here shortly, and it looks right up the valley and tons of sun in the winter. And so, but the overriding thing with why to use a real estate agent is because the seller pays the commission, not you. So now selling a home, if you want to go for sale by owner, you can consider that. You'll be probably a little bit more educated in real estate decisions by then. The problem with for sale by owner, again, my experience as a real estate agent was that I would go to somebody's house and they think their house is worth, $1 million. And it's like, yeah, no, it will never sell for this. I can't list it for that because we're kind of wasting each other's time. And so the people get insulted and they'll say, fine, I'll just sell it myself. And so they'll put it up at their high price. And so if you think you're doing, going to go for sale by owner to get a better rate, that can happen. But it can also be just the opposite. And then I've also been out to homes where it's for sale by owner and, the well doesn't work or this doesn't work because the inspections weren't done. A real estate agent, if they are involved in the transaction and there's a problem with disclosures and things like that, they're going to get sued. And since they're the agent, they're going to lose. It's just the way the courts are. And so agents are very thorough just out of pure defensiveness to make sure that things are done properly for the most part. Now, are there some flakes? Sure. And are there some agents that absolutely aren't worth their whatever, But for me, it was also frustrating with the buyers. I'd get buyers, and you'd be showing them a home they'd want to see this home, and it's kind of a dog, but it had really nice interior, really nice, some sort of changeable item. Oh, I like the drapes or the paint, but it's a crappy neighborhood. It's like, or conversely, you'd see some home that really had some potential, and they just wouldn't see it because it was painted the wrong color or there was junk in the yard. I mean, things that you can fix like that fairly easily, that may be kind of a sleeper. So anyway, online realtor services, I don't think they're quite there yet. I don't know. The real estate people they do provide a service. The Zillows and the Redfins and those things out there are trying to kind of supplant them, but I don't think that's going to happen as long as they have some value added. There's a lot of things online that, like I say, just in terms of property selection, that depends on your knowledge of the local area. If you're born and raised here, you know exactly where you want to go, maybe that'll work. But if you're looking for some insight, and again, that's why you got to have a good agent, not just somebody you find on the phone book. So criteria: price, convenient location, maintenance, school, assurance, taxes, HOAs. Love them or hate them. I hate them. But some people, they're great. They keep people from doing other, painting their house purple right next to you, or I've got a house in the house in Eagle that I have. The neighbor's got every Alaskan toy right there, proudly displayed in his yard. Just looks like, and I thought he wouldn't be there this long, but he looks like he's there for the duration. So I know when I go to sell this home, people are just going to look at his yard. And it's certainly not going to be a selling point for my house. But then I had another friend who was a coworker of mine, and he was a tree counter. He had to go around his little subdivision and make sure that everybody had at least 3 live trees in their front yard because this is a newer subdivision. And, you know, if you don't have 3 live trees, you got to plant one or start getting fined. They were just so anal. Absolutely no trailers in the front or in the yard. And everything else, some of it was good, but the you know, especially when you got moose up here. Oh, yeah, they're sitting there watching the moose and writing you a ticket for the lack of trees that the moose just ate. Anyway, resale value, yeah, it's things in Alaska again especially because of military influence. They tend to go up by about 6% every 3 years, at least, because some military person moves in here on a 3-year tour, and they buy the house for $299, and they want to get out of it what they got into it, so they're gonna have to pay a commission to sell it, 6%. So there's 18 grand. So now all of a sudden that $299 is $320. Anyway, the people try and cover their stuff. Personal preferences, again, temper that. Go easy on that. Don't get anything too unique. I like things that are on the edges. You know, we don't have golf courses up here, but we do have green space. If you get something that's kind of close to wide expanse of land that's not going to be developed, that could be huge. Creek, I've got waterfront. I love things on rivers and stuff. Again, though, that's a dangerous game because I'm dealing with, well, I haven't had any erosion, but I've just had accretion where land is added. But you can get, well, actually, I know I've got a place up on the Matanuska that it's probably losing a fair amount, but it's 65 acres, so it'll have to erode a fair amount before it's gone. Market analysis. Yep. Comparable sales. That's how they figure. Now, this whole thing, though, price per square foot. Well, what about the lot size? You know, is it a 2-acre lot, 1-acre lot? Don't tell me a 3,000 square foot house is worth this much when I don't know the location, I don't know the lot size. So it's not quite as easy as they would make it sound. They have to look for comparable sales based upon a lot of factors. Again, they'll come up with these, oh yeah, things in this neighborhood go for this price. If they're like these cookie cutter tract homes, maybe that's valid. If there's someplace you'd probably want to live, out in a more rural area, too many variables. Demand for homes. So as interest rates come down, which they probably should here slightly, home prices will typically go up because there's more people that can buy homes. So supply and demand. There's more buyers in the market, and that's how it goes up. Right now, home prices have probably been a little bit more depressed than they should be because of the higher interest rates. Impact mortgage defaults. Lessons from the crisis. I don't think anybody learned any lessons. The mortgage applications got a lot longer, but they creep back to the old processes. Zoning laws. Yeah. Typically zoning laws will prevent, a big industrial plant being built right next to your property. So it does pay if you're looking at buying a property, see what the zoning is. And, like I say, when you're trying to move next to a nice big open space, but if it's zoned for commercial, don't be surprised when a, muffler shop, tire shop goes in there and they're, making all kinds of racket and your property value's down. Negotiating the price. Yep. So once you say you're selling a house, they offer you're selling it for $320. They offer you $300. You make a counter offer, and you say, "Nah, meet me at $310 or something like that." That first offer is gone. If they say no, we're not paying $310, you say, okay, fair enough, I'll take the $300. Well, they don't have to offer the $300 anymore. That your new offer superseded that other offer. That offer is no longer valid. But you can typically get the price down a little bit. Depends on the market. Sometimes prices go up. I mean, it can just be, you got to, again, this is where having a salesperson, an agent can help know what's prevalent in the market. Again, but it's got to be somebody you can trust. So best thing you can do to buy a home is go get pre-qualified and then find an agent. If some agent will start showing you homes when you're not pre-qualified, that's not a good agent. They're wasting their time, and you're wasting their time, and you've showed a lack of seriousness, and the fact that they're even dealing with you means that they got time to waste, and they're not that busy because they're wasting their time on silly things. 10 to 20% for down payment, collateral. Yep. Sometimes like VA, a lot of times no down payment. PMI, this just means you can't come up with the 20%. I did this one time. We needed a home. The Las Vegas market was exploding. So we didn't qualify for, it was outside of the VA limits in this case, so I had to go conventional. And then I couldn't come up with the full 20%, but I did private mortgage insurance, so I put down like 15%. And I had to pay, maybe $100 and something each month for private mortgage insurance. And all I did was wait about 3 months, had the house reappraised, and the value of the house had gone up, 10 or 20 grand. And then I had equity, and so then I went back to the lender and said, okay, now that I've got the equity, I have more than the 20% in collateral, so I don't have to pay PMI anymore. And so that went away. Closing cost, yeah, there's all these little piddly fees, about 10 grand worth of charges. There's certain ones that the buyer pays, that the seller pays. The seller pays the commission, which is the big one, 6%. Fixed rate mortgage, that's the good, cautious. Variable rate mortgages that's something that was huge back in before 2007, a little bit less now. But if you get a fixed rate mortgage for, say, 3% or less, who knows if we'll ever have that again. But that's why there's such a clogged up real estate market, is because all the boomers got these 3% mortgages, and they don't want to sell them because they'll lose that beneficial situation they got going on right now. Amortization table. I'm going to show you some charts on this rather than go through this. So, but what I was talking about with the payment and the principal, you see how the payments, this fixed amount, $537, principal $120, interest $417. So fairly high in the interest rate. Interest rate is $417. Here at the end of the loan, interest rate is only $3, or interest payment is only $3. The principal is being paid down hugely. So on the first part of the loan, you are not paying much towards the principal. You're paying a ton towards the interest. Yeah, this is kind of a no-brainer. We'll look at that. And another chart. Again, same principal paid, interest paid. So huge amounts of interest on the first part of the loan, all tax deductible. Your tax deductibility at the end of the loan, pretty small. Payment's still the same, but the amount that you can deduct is quite small. And for people who learn visually, here you go. Same sort of thing, interest and principal. Very small interest at the end, very big at the front. Different amounts. So obviously, number go up, payment go up. Yep. I'm just buzzing through the slides because I'm going to take you guys to a better site here in a second. Bankrate.com. Yeah, I was just on their site. It's kind of garbage. I'll show it to you in a second. Characteristics of a fixed rate mortgage. So as interest rates come up, the same 100 grand at 4% is only $477 payment. At 8%, it's now $734. Not quite double, but getting there. And mortgage rates on a 15-year, you can do what you like. Different people can have different opinions. I go for 30 if I can get a low interest rate because I'm renting money, and if it's a low enough rate, I want to, at 3%, I am in no hurry to pay that off. And again, another one, 15 and 30. ARMs, adjustable rate mortgages. I had one of these in Europe, and it was fantastic. Interest rates were probably around 4 or 5 at the time, and I was paying, I think, 2.8 or something. Super low. I only had it for 10 years. But you had to kind of, it's kind of a gut check. You had to be able to weather the storm in case things went up. I had a friend, Spanish friend of mine, Carbo, and I'd worked with him in Spain, and he was a Deutsche Bank guy, and so he hooked me up and basically processed my loan for my German home from Spain. And yeah, he was a good finance dude. He understood all this stuff quite well, and paid off that loan in 10 years, and I was set. Caps on adjustable rate mortgages. So what happens if the interest rate goes up? Your interest rate in general, if interest rates go up in the market, your ARM will also go up, but it can't go from 3% to 6% a year. It can only go up by a fixed amount each year. Depends on the contract, and it's tied to some rate. My rate, because I was in Europe, it was the LIBOR, the London Interbank rate, whatever. The States, it'll be a Fed rate, and they'll index it every year, and your interest rate may go up or go down, so your payment may go up or go down. Decision to own versus rent. We talked a bit about that. Owning also has tax advantages. Yeah, they put that in there as just a little sub thing. That's one of the main things. Plus, you build an equity. I'm not going to discuss these so much because they've gotten rid of, not gotten rid of, but it really takes a special case to get one of these type of loans. A balloon payment where super low rates, this is where you're going to flip the house. You're never going to pay the balloon payment. You're going to make these very small interest-only payments and then flip the house before you hit the main rate. And this is how these people had, multiple mortgages. And so interest only is even a different variation of the balloon one where they're just going to continue on interest only. Your principal is still sitting out there the entire time. You'll never pay it off. It's not meant to be paid off. It's meant to be flipped. Refinancing, when rates go down by about 1% or so, you refinance. And so if you want to get in, my daughter, for example, she bought a home and the rate's 6% plus, but the notion is that she's going to have to suck it up for a year or two here. But now that interest rates go down, consider refinancing. And then that's how I got all my loans. I didn't start out with 3% loans. I had 4 or whatever. I needed the house, so I couldn't play the market like that because I needed a place to live. But once the rates came down, I was able to jump in. So I'm going to have a whole section at the end after we finish with the lectures. Towards the end of the course is what I'm saying about the whole buying process and where's the next one? Okay, so I want to show you some slides regarding mortgage and how this stuff kind of sort of works. Let me get this thing out of the way. Okay, so all those slides where they're talking about the amount of principal and interest and everything else you pay. Okay, so this is the amount remaining, right? You start out with your whole loan, and then you end up at zero. And this is the amount of principal that's being paid on the initial part of the loan, right? And it creeps up and up and up. And then the interest that's being paid. So, maybe not the most graphic. I'll look for a better example. But what it's trying to show you, if you interpret this chart correctly, you'll see that mainly your interest is being paid in the first part of the loan. You're just paying interest, and then towards the end of the loan, you're paying mainly principal. Let me look at a different one here. Here's a chart. This is fairly useful. You put in a mortgage amount, term, years. We're at 15-year right now. Typically, you want to go out to 30 because that's what most loans are. And 7%. Yeah, it's probably closer to 6 right now. So those numbers right there are going to cost you $1,800 bucks. Keep in mind, property taxes and insurance are the two other items that would come in here. So you're probably looking at around $2,100 for your mortgage payment if they're paid into an escrow and then they pay those accounts. Now, as things change in terms of term, you can see that your amount of interest and principal are going to change significantly. So you go 15 years and boom, you're paying a lot less interest and your principal is getting paid off quicker. But if you've got a good rate and you're essentially renting money, if you're renting money for 3%, then you want to ride that horse as far as possible because the longer you have that loan. So this is not Dave Ramsey stuff. Some of these people that are totally debt free, that's not how they got their wealth. They used a lot of borrowed money and leverage to amass their wealth. But for the crowd they're talking to, which are generally people who can't do finance and have gotten themselves in big trouble and need training wheels, they're going to give them a very cautious, debt-free approach. But that's fine, But I'm just saying that you're not going to you're not going to generate wealth that way, and you're going to be just an indentured servant. It's just the way it works. It's quite. You'll look at your 401k balance. You're going, oh, I'm doing all right. I'm making whatever percent. But the hurdle rate right now is in double digits. By the time you add up inflation and debasement of the currency, if you're not making, it could be as high as 14%, the total that you would need to make just to be treading water. If you wonder why I've got more money now, but I can afford less, it's because the debasement of the currency. So a little more to that. What else do we got? Current mortgage rates. Yeah, this is the bank rate site, and they don't even really play ball up here. Find my rates, and I don't even think they even serve this area. Yeah, so we don't accept quotes for your zip code. It does pay typically to go with lower rates. Here's a Bakersfield. I would buy real estate in Bakersfield. Please enter a valid zip code. So, yeah, I'm just not impressed with this stupid site. It doesn't seem to even work. I know that's a 309. I swear to God, that's a good zip code. Anyway, but I think we got out of it. You know, the thing that's kind of making me angry here is this chart. I'm trying to figure out the percentage. So the purple is definitely, they got their colors too. They should have gone with more distinct colors. The amount remaining is going down to 0. So that's the overall loan being paid off. The amount of principal being paid is the green one. So very little at first, very much at the end. I sound like a chain smoker. Bit of a cold going on. And here's the interest. And the interest. Yep, right colors. Anyway, maybe I'm colorblind, but the charts out there are much more useful. Big picture is that at first you pay a ton of interest, very little principal. At the end of the loan, you pay a ton of principal, very little interest. So you'll hear people say, well, you know, this loan's no longer working, I'm going to refinance. If you refinance completely, you know, take a whole new loan, then it's going to rejigger that whole interest versus principal, because it'll be based on the new loan amount. So that's another thing that would go into the equation. All righty then. So I think we're good. Like I say, the midterm review will be coming out shortly, and no homework this week because you're going to be concentrating on the test, as you should. So good luck.